This is what I did on my spring vacation. I went to Tucson, Arizona and built a radio station. I brought my somewhat artistic grandson along, and in the studio he found a whiteboard and he drew this. KWAK is the radio station we were building. So he drew this, and the station manager came in and looked at it and said, okay, we'll accept that as the first submission for the new station's logo. So it was in Tucson, Arizona, but I had a whole bunch of tools to take, so it was road trip. And Texas is big. When we got there, the transmitter site was going on this hill by the water tanks, and there was this lovely road leading up to the site, about a quarter of a mile, and it was a gravel road. You can see there's a sample of the gravel. I'm serious, the road was covered with small boulders. It made going up and down interesting. You can see that dark thing on the road. You'll see what that is in a moment. So here's the site. They prepped it for us before we got there. They cleared it and leveled it. Notice how level it is. The back of the site over here to the front of the site over here dropped about 8 feet. That was level. It's a mountain. What can you do? Okay. So normally we put a tower up. I've built several radio stations for this client. We've always used regular radio towers. But the cost of bringing concrete up that mountain was outrageous. And we decided we were going to use a wooden pole. So the utility company brought out this pole, and there was this crack in it. You see my hand next to the crack. I could stick my fingers into the second knuckle into the crack. But the utility company assured me, it's fine, it'll work. So we put it up. Wood doesn't conduct very well, and towers get struck by lightning, so we ran a number 2-aught copper wire down the pole before it went up.
It fit right in and cracked.
Okay, so we put a hole in the ground for the pole. The utility company came and dug this hole. That's the hole. And they dug it on one day, and since a hole like that's very dangerous, it's 10 feet deep, it's only maybe 3 feet across. If you go wandering around the site at night, you could fall in there and we'd just fill it in. That's your grave, because you're not getting out. It's worse than a well. So they found this wonderful safety device to keep people from falling in the hole. I thought that was kind of ridiculous. But no one fell in the hole, or if they did, we just dropped the pole on top of them. So the next day we put the pole in the hole.
So how long was the pole, 100 feet?
The pole was 75 feet, 10 feet in the ground, 65 feet in the air. And it's kind of interesting the way you plumb the pole. They have this rig with claws that grabs the pole, and then they can tilt it right, left, and back and forth. So here's this guy standing there holding a string with a plumb bob on the end, and he's got his fingers in a ring like this so he can feel the plumb bob and knows it's vertical. And he sits there and tilts his head one way or the other, and the guy operating the rig tilts the pole until it's level, and then he goes 90 degrees and does it again, and they say it's done. So there's the pole. And now this is what that dark thing was going up the road. We had 12 tons of gravel that we had to carry up the road because the truck wouldn't come up the road with the gravel. So driving this thing up and down that road with those boulders and rocks and was an experience, because it would bounce around and it would twist sideways, and We didn't roll it, but when we got the skid steer, when they delivered it, there was grass and dirt in the top. So people do roll these things. That's why it's got a roll cage around it. Okay, so these are the two people I had working for me to build the site. And you'll notice one's a big, strong young man who's standing there with his hands on his hips watching the petite young girl muscle around 65-pound concrete blocks. I thought that was kind of strange, but she said, yeah, he's kind of lazy, and she does most of the heavy lifting. Everyone got a turn to drive the skid steer. There's the young lady driving it. And there's me driving it. Again, no concrete at the site. All we had was gravel. Well, there is a little concrete here, but it was just for anchors. So the site, the equipment went on a platform. There's a steel deck that I'm bringing into position there. And there's the first steel deck in position. And you can see on the high side, over here, there's one 4-inch concrete block. And on the low side, there's 5. And that steel deck is only 6 feet wide. So that's
nice and level.
Nice and level. That's right. This pole here is for utility power. The antenna pole is next to the cabinet. That's an air-conditioned box, a radio cabinet. And then we took a break and we went to Las Vegas and we looked at lots of cool stuff. Here's a really nice helmet I'd like to get. It's got cameras that look in every direction. You put this thing on and you can take some wild pictures. And there were lots of drones and then we did a little sightseeing. And so we get back to work in the desert while we were gone. Had bloomed. Okay, so we're back to work assembling the deck. Got handrails on it. It's
Is that required by code?
yeah, actually it is, because one side of the deck is too high. And at the studio, we put in a lightning ground. We also used a wooden pole at the studio. Didn't need to be as big. And then we put the antenna up. So here's the antenna getting hauled up, and there's climbers on the pole. That guy at the top is at 65 feet. And the antenna's on a steel mast, and it's attached to the wooden pole with these 2-foot standoffs that are tied onto the pole with chains.
Half waves in phase, or is that what it is?
They're full wave, 3 bays, 1, 2, 3, full wave. And then we put a second mast. Just here's the upper mast. It's 30 feet with 3 bays, and then there's a 20-foot mast underneath. And you can see over there we put microwave dishes on that mast because the IT department said, "Oh boy, you're putting a tower up on the hill. We want to put antennas on it."
Why didn't you put the pole on the top of the hill? Was there some reason for that? Or?
Yes. This was the site they said we could use. I actually picked another site about 10 feet further over off the road, which was level. But my client is an Indian nation, and Indians have something called sacred ground. And sacred ground seems to be just about anywhere except one particular spot where they want you to work. And everything else is sacred land, so, okay. Okay, so back at the studio, there you can see the chain mounts a little better. We put 900 megahertz Yagis up for linking the transmitter site to the studio. Here's back at the transmitter site. we've got the power drop in, and we're waiting for the utility company to turn it on. You can see the cables coming down the pole, but they haven't been attached to the cable support yet. And the desert's still blooming. We've been out there about a little over 2 weeks, and people are getting a little nutty. So we have this stuff that I call monkey poo, which we use for weatherproofing. And Jana, the young lady who is such a hard worker, said, oh, it's monkey poo, so she formed it into a little pile of poo. So time to install the equipment in the cabinet and run the cables. And there was this fence compound around the water tanks. And we parked the skid steer inside the fence at night. And the first time we drove it in, we ripped the concrete out of the center of the gate. So we had to fix it. I guess that's a picture looking straight up the pole. Finishing up at the studio, a couple more antennas and some lightning ground, and they're on the air. There's a ladder in the picture, but it didn't stay. But that's it. That's everything. Power comes in, goes underground to the deck. There's the 900 megahertz at the transmitter, linking it back to the studio. And that's it. Any questions?
Was it a dry heat?
It was a dry heat. It was pretty warm. It's not like Florida. The sun is intense. It's really hot. You have to. The temperature's not as bad as the sun. I wore long sleeves. I don't know if you saw the picture of me driving the skid steer. I had a long sleeve flannel shirt and a hat, and I had this big thing that went all the way around my neck that I could soak in water, and I could pull it up over my face because it was dusty. Yeah, you don't want to have a lot of exposed skin. Okay, thank you.